back to Unfolding Truth Podcast.
Welcome.
Super excited to have y'all. I'm excited about this conversation today. It's going to be good. But I want to ask, I haven't seen you in a bit, so
it's been a minute.
Just curious to know, how's your heart?
It's good. I think God is doing a lot in a very short period. I just feel like this has been my life since I got with my husband. He's been doing so much in such a short period of time, and I'm just blown away, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think my heart is good. I'm grateful for where we're at right now in life, and I'm just excited to see what God is going to continue to do.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I think overall, overall I feel like it's good. I feel like the last maybe couple of months of this year has been, for the most part, a breath of fresh air. I feel like I've been able to lean in to just what God's doing in and through my heart, because the last few months of 2022 was just, I feel like I don't know, I feel like I couldn't catch a breath. I feel like I couldn't, how when you, I don't want to assume just your story, but when you've been trying to fight and survive for most of your life, you're just trying to do whatever you can. I feel like that was the end of 2020, where I was just trying to survive and get through the panic attacks, get through the anxiety, and it was one of those things where Jesus here, I can invite him in this, and life could be not easier, but he can help me suffer well, if that makes sense. And so I think this last couple of months, the beginning of this year has been one of those things where I'm I get to check my pulse and lean into those moments of okay, God, what are you doing in my heart? And I feel like he's doing a lot in my heart right now. A lot of good things, a lot of chiseling away, a lot of I feel like it's always God's always refining us, God's always purifying us, he's always working through us. And so I feel like for the most part, my heart is good. But I think, it's hard to be I don't know. I feel like I'm all over the place, but I feel like when you look at the mirror of the word, there is this level of conviction. There's this healthy shame of okay, God, how do I become more and more like you, And so I don't know, he's just been showing me just a lot of areas of girl, let's do some work there. And so for the most part, good. So
I love what you just said, and I feel like we can talk about this on another episode or something. You said, healthy shame.
It's a new thing. I'm not gonna lie.
That's
Jose,
it.
shout out to my husband. He over there. we literally just, because we have debates, we have arguments all the time about just different hard topics, complex topics and ideas. And it's a new thought. It's a new thought, right? I think shame is an emotion, right? I know in the beginning of the Bible we see shame, and it wasn't, the response to shame wasn't a good thing. But I think my new thought is that shame isn't always a bad thing. I think when I converted to Christianity, there was a shame of my sin of I'm ashamed of this,
right.
And I desperately need a savior. So I don't know. It's something I'm wrestling with, though.
That's really good. I feel like we should definitely talk about, I know y'all want to talk about that, because that is I feel like the term is healthy shame. It's contradictory, But I think that's a good thing, because I agree. I think there is a level of, a healthy amount of shame that we can. I don't know if you've ever seen it on IG and stuff, where people are bring back shame in the comments. I to read comments and stuff this because people are so open. That's the thing. Be authentic, be you, be real. But there's no, there's no privacy. You know what I mean? People just share everything.
Bring back shame. Okay.
Yeah, they share
a level
too
of privacy.
much.
It's
exactly.
You're vomiting on the internet.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So in the comments they'll be bring back shame, you know what I mean? This
yeah,
is too much. You should be
I'm
shameful that you're sharing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's I think that's an interesting term. I think that would be a good conversation.
I think so too.
You
I
know?
think especially too, I feel like over the last maybe like, and I'm guilty of it too, like preached about it. I think I wrote a blog about it years ago of like shame off you. And I agree, like, you know, like when the enemy tries to put on that shame, I think our response in those moments really matter, or our response to that, it matters. Like how you respond to it. If I respond to it by hiding, if I respond to it by grabbing things to make me feel comfortable, kind of like in the beginning with Adam and Eve, they grabbed things that to cover up essentially. So I think how we respond to shame really matters, or determines if it's like a healthy or a not so healthy. I don't know. So yeah,
we gotta dig into that more another time.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, I want to do something different today. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna pull out one of these cards, and you can do it for me as well too. Okay, I'm gonna pick one of these. These are questions. Shout out to Wild Leaders for providing these. Like, it's kind of like we're not really stranger cards. Okay. So I'm gonna grab one, and I'm gonna ask you just this random question, and then you have to answer it on the spot. So I'm gonna just kind of, I don't know. We'll see. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, let me read it first. Ooh, okay, this is a good one. What important details on your agenda are part of your bigger purpose?
Ooh, that is a deep question. What important details on my agenda are a part of my bigger purpose? Important details. I would say it's so weird. Like, okay, so I'm very, like, I plan a lot. Like, I have my planner, and then it's crazy because I have this section, and it's like top 3 things to focus on for the day, whatever. So I think consistently what I do see in those top 3 things, I'm just gonna go there with it, that I see throughout, like, consistently every week, has to be dealing with stewardship. So stewarding my body, and stewarding, like, my, I don't know if this makes sense, but, like, stewarding, like, my presence, like, when I'm with my kids and when I'm with my husband, because I think that, you know, those things, like, lead to, you know, our well, at least for me, like, my bigger purpose. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, but then, like, I also want to live my life to where I'm, like, I want to experience life healthy, you know what I mean? Like, in my family, like, diabetes, high blood pressure, like, that's, like, you know, it runs on both sides of my family. So, like, for me, stewarding my body well is important, because I didn't see that happen, like, with my grandparents and with my uncles and stuff like that. And so I want to be mindful, you know, like, I have, like, a love-hate relationship with working out. Like, I'm I told you this before, like, I'm not working out over an hour. Like, that's just, I'm not that person who's in the gym for 2-3 hours.
It's ridiculous,
I don't have time for that. Like, I'm
especially
30 minutes, in between 30 minutes and an hour is good for me. And I'd say, like, my goal is, like, 4 times a week. If I do 3 times a week, I'm good with that. Max really 5 times a week. I'm not working out more than 5 times a week. So stewarding my body well, because, you know, like, I want to be, you know, healthy and present when my kids are older. And I mean, if Jesus don't come back by then, like, grandchildren, you know what I mean? Like, I want to live my life that way. So yeah, I'd say stewarding my body, so I can be present, for, you know, present and well for, you know, years to come. And then also stewarding, like, my time, you know, with my kids. So now I'm in the season where, like, I had this season where I was just a stay-at-home mom and not really working. But now I'm still a stay-at-home mom, but I am also working from home. And I'm doing something that I love. I mean, I love children. I love teaching, and so now, you know, God has blessed me with this position to run children's ministry at our church, but I'm also able to, like, work from home with that. So I'm trying to figure out, like, how to manage my time, you know, like working from home, but also being present with my kids. And I also want to homeschool. So I'm like, how do I figure, like, so I think those are the things, those are important details that, like lead to my bigger purpose. But I'm still trying to navigate and figure out, how do I make this work and how do I do it well? You know what I mean? And then, you know, me and my husband, we're getting to spend time more together since now we're also working in the same place. So there are some days that I do go in to work at the church, and one of those days I get to bring the kids with me, which is awesome. But then one of the days I'm not bringing them with me. My mother-in-law is gonna stay with them, but I'm able to just like be with him. And this is something we always envisioned, like before we got together, like doing ministry together. So I think those are the things that I consistently see every week that kind of lead to like my greater purpose, bigger purpose.
I love that. I love that because like you talked about like, I guess, generational curses, things that like, you know, you didn't necessarily see within like your family. And I feel like, you know, for the most part, when we talk about like generational curses, it's always like, you know, addictions and it's like, I don't know, poverty, which are very much they're curses, like they're generational things. But I think like hearing you say like, I want to steward my presence in the life of my kids and my family's life. I think, you know, did you grow up in a single parent home? Ish?
Yeah.
Okay, I grew up in a single parent home. My mom like was a single mom. She worked a lot, and like, you know, she had to work sometimes 2-3 jobs just to make sure like, you know, we were well taken care of. But I think for me, like, and that speaks to me because when I have a family or even just marriage, like how intentional that we try to be like within our relationship. Like a generational curse for me is the presence, like because my mom was so busy, because she was always out of the house and she was a boss mom and she did all this working, like the things that we really needed was affection, was presence, was her emotional availability. And so for me, more than money, more than, you know, like, yes, those things matter more, you know, and all that, but I want to give my kids the beauty of my presence, the beauty of like emotional support and stability. And so I don't know, when you said that, I was like, dude, that like hit me because like we don't typically think of those as like generational curses.
Wow,
so
that's really good. I love that perspective. And I think it's true, like for mothers, and that's a whole nother conversation about like motherhood, biblical motherhood. Like, what does that mean? Because I feel like we are very far from it. That you see so much stuff like on social media and stuff like that. So I think that's a whole nother conversation. Let me pull one of these out for you.
Make it good.
Okay.
You gonna read it first?
I'm gonna. Okay.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's a little bit similar though. Okay. I feel like I should choose another one.
Okay, go
for
it.
Should I choose another one?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that one was too similar.
You could cheat a little too. I'm sorry. No?
Okay. I'm just gonna go with it.
Okay.
Okay. It says, "Where do you lead?"
Where do I lead? Ooh, that's a good one. I lead. Well, I think. Okay. This is gonna be a little bit of like. Yeah, just go with me. I don't lead within my marriage, thank God. My husband's a great leader. But I do, like, I lead with my life. That might sound like really weird, but I think early on in my journey, and even early on with working in church and ministry, I always knew like I can't lead people if I'm not first. And I know I'm not a single woman anymore. I'm married and all of those things, but there still is a responsibility as, you know, individuals, as people, to like lead your own. Oh, that sounds so weird. This sounds so weird because it almost sounds like I'm removing God and like my husband, but I'm not. Like,
okay.
And maybe it could sound weird, and that's okay. But because it's not gonna come out like, you know, how I would like it or how it sounds in my head. But like, yeah, I think early on I adapted, like, dude, you can't lead anybody if you don't first like lead your own life or take responsibility for your own life or take responsibility for your own healing, for your own journey. And so I think the first place I start is with my own life. And yes, I'm submitted to God and my husband, but at the same time, like there's a partnership with God, and there's a responsibility to, yeah, this sounds really weird. There is a responsibility. It's gonna sound really weird to, like, if we're over spiritualizing. I'm trying not to over spiritualize it in the sense of, like, you know, hear what I'm saying and what I'm not saying.
Okay.
Yeah, so like a responsibility to like lead my own life and make, you know, all of those things. So I think, does that make sense? That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but I don't think it actually sounds weird.
I know it sounds a little weird.
Because I feel like, okay, well, scripture tells us like faith without works is dead. So there is
and work out your own salvation. So
right.
I work out my own salvation in my life, right?
There's an aspect of responsibility that we have
as believers, as people, to, yes, absolutely. And the scripture that comes to mind is work out your own salvation. And so again, like early on, adopted, you can't lead anybody where you have not gone. You can't lead anybody if you don't know how to steward your own life, if you don't take responsibility for your own life. So that's the first and foremost place for me. I take it really serious, and maybe almost to a fault, like where I'm very introspective. I'm always looking at me as a leader, how I am in my own life, and then that's how I essentially lead others. So I lead with my husband in our organization at RAG, and I lead at church in, you know, Next Steps. Those are pretty much the only areas.
Lots
I don't
of
have
places though.
Would you say it? It feels very. It doesn't feel like a lot in this season.
Really?
Just because I feel like in the past, like I've led, you know, way more than how I'm leading in this capacity. But I think it's good because I didn't have the beauty in the beginning of ministry to go deeper with people. Like I just didn't. The way like ministry was set up, it was just very like, it was very go, 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 go. It was very much like, you know, everybody kind of, I did lead a lot of leaders in the past, so maybe that could be why. But now I think it's a good place to be in, because now you get to go deeper in deeper relationships. And for me, like I value the deeper more than the wider, if that makes sense. And so it feels more like more depth now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I feel like I had
you had a thought?
I had a thought. Because you said, okay, so I feel like you lead in a lot of places. Like
out 2 places or?
Well, I mean, because you're doing it at church, but then you're also doing it with Jose, with RAG, and then as far as like yourself, you know, like that's a big thing. You know what I mean? Like being introspective and you know, being like concerned about like how you're leading in those places. I think it's more than you think it is. Like just because there's not like a 5, you know, different avenues, but like what you're doing is like hard work, is deep work.
It's good.
But then like how you said in previous seasons you were leading, you know, way more in different avenues. But so my thought was like, okay, did it feel that way because like were you doing it alongside someone, or were you doing it by yourself?
Like in the past, right? You're talking about both and?
Okay.
Both and?
Okay.
Yeah. Both and. I mean, it was when I did young adults, I mean, I had a few leaders. I mean, if you worked in young adults, you know, like that's a very transitional you know, phase for a lot of young adults. Like you have people getting married, you have people going off to college, you have people having families and all of these different things. And so leaders come and go, people come and go, and so that was pretty much my experience. We had a core group of people that thankfully, led alongside me. But then there was others at, church where it was like, a brand new church plant. So it was like you lead in a prayer team, you just kind of figure it out. And so for the most part, I feel like it's been like a both and thing. There, of course, in, I think different seasons you feel like you're leading alone, or it feels kind of lonely in some seasons. But for the most part, it was a both and type of thing where we were leading, where I led with other people too. So yeah. Well, I'm excited to get into the conversation today.
Me too.
We're talking all things polygamy and gender roles.
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing our conversation from the Love is Blind series. And that popped up in, it's season 3. Season 3 of Love is Blind. I think it was the second episode.
Yeah, episode 2.
Yeah, where Raven and SK, they had that conversation in the pods, and he mentioned how his father practiced polygamy. So yeah, we're going to be continuing this conversation. I know...
You want to give like a summary just for like, I don't know if people didn't watch Love is Blind?
Yeah.
Okay.
So SK, he's a Nigerian man. He comes from the Nigerian culture, and he's sharing with a girl that he's dating through these pods. They can't see each other. Okay, so I just want to stop there because there was this whole like these rumors going around about SK and Raven, and those of you who have followed the show,
marrying, or because I didn't watch all of it.
No, they didn't end up marrying.
Okay.
They just released a couple more episodes, like after the altar, whatever. So they did not get married at the altar, but there was like these rumors going around saying that they knew each other.
Ooh.
And they decided to go on the show together. So like, cause she does Pilates, and she was trying to grow like her following, and he was doing it for the money.
Okay. Oh shoot.
Yeah. So there was like this whole thing about that. So I was talking to my mom about it, and so I was reading some articles, but I don't think they knew each other. I don't think that was true. I think that was a rumor that was started. Mm-hmm. But he did cheat on her. So
wait, how you cheat in the pods? Like you become...
Okay, no.
Oh.
Okay, so he was talking with a girl before he got on the show, right? Mm-hmm. And he continued talking with her, I guess, like after the show, and him and Raven were trying to figure out whether they were gonna continue dating. And then I guess they decided that they were, but he was like low key on the low, talking to another girl, going on trips with her, because they were living in separate states. So him and Raven were in separate states. So yeah, so he was like cheating on her. So there's like this whole like lawsuit thing going on right now. They didn't share all the details, but SK was messing with a couple other girls. So in the show, he says he's not. She kind of asked him, like, he shares with her that, you know, he comes from a polygamist family, so he has like tons of brothers and sisters, and she kind of asked him, you know, like, are you into that? And he was like, no, it's not something I ever thought about. But come to find out, with him cheating, I think maybe he was into it a little bit, like trying to live this, you know, double life. Like maybe he was into it, but like polygamy, I don't think polygamy is legal. Not in the U.S. Yeah, it's not legal here. So I think he was into it, but like he lives here, so I can't be polygamous legally. But maybe I still have this desire to do it, but he was just low key kind of doing it, like messing with other girls at the same time he was with Raven. So he shares on the show that he never considered himself to like be interested in it. And he mentions like he believes in like equal partnership, and he doesn't believe in gender roles. So, I mean, people talk about polygamy. I remember I shared with you this debate, and they were talking about how polygamy was in the Bible.
Yes.
You remember that debate?
I think so.
It was like the Democrats against the Republicans.
Yeah,
and so briefly in that conversation, one of the Democrats was like, well, polygamy was in the Bible, and, you know, the patriarchs, you know, were into polygamy. So
I feel like that's the biggest, when we think about, like, the topic of polygamy in Christianity, I think, I feel like unbelievers, they have, like, their, like, handful of, like, arguments to invalidate, like, scripture, and polygamy in the Bible is one of them. Like, I feel like it's one of the ones they always kind of point out. Well, like, why did this,
Old
like,
Testament.
why did, Old Testament. Well, it's in the Bible, so maybe it's okay. Which is interesting too, because I was like, I read a article, because I think, well, first, I think this is important, like, and I don't know why you think it's important, so I would love to hear your thoughts. I think it's important because, like, I know, like, I don't watch these shows because I'm not really into reality TV shows, but there's, like, shows called, like, Sister Wives.
Oh yeah.
There's, like, what is it called, My Five Wives, like, like, even though, like, it's not, like, legal here in the U.S., which it's legal in just different countries, I think, like Africa mainly or something like that. But I read an article, and it was a Gallup poll, I think 2020 or maybe 2022, they did a poll, and they said that 1 in 5 adults believe that polygamy is morally acceptable. And so that would, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Pablo.
Who in this room?
Pablo believes. I'm sorry, I couldn't know this. Because there's 5 of us in this room, so one of us in here believe that. I'm just kidding. That was funny. Okay. So I thought it was interesting too, and I think it's important too, because, like, it may not be legal, but we still have, like, this, this, what do you call it? Like, this trend, this, like, it's becoming much more popular, like, now. People believe is okay, and I get it. Like, it was a thing in the ancient world, but I think it's also important too, because they say, like, the rate of marriage has literally decreased over the last, like, 100 something years, and so we have all of these different, like, beliefs and ideologies, and people, like, think like, they're very permissive to just different, like, ideas. And, like, if sister wives, I didn't know that was a real thing. I've heard the terminology. Like, I don't know but I didn't know, like, it was a show. I didn't know it was a thing. So I'm like, this is a real thing. No, it's not legal here, but we still have these people practicing. So it's becoming, like, over the, I don't know, last several years, it's become this, like, trending thing. And so I don't know. I just think this conversation of polygamy is important because we're shaped by culture. Like, and the church is too. Can we be honest? Like, if we're not careful to think biblically about everything, the church, our minds, our beliefs, our values, and things are constantly being shaped by society and culture. And so if we have 1 in 5 people who believe, like, this is morally acceptable, I don't think that excludes the church.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think, and then there's serial polygamy. Have you seen that term?
No.
Okay, so serial polygamy is like you marry and then divorce, and then you remarry and then divorce, and then it just keeps going. So there are, like, people, like, who have been married, like, 3-4 times. So they call that serial polygamy because you're just with someone for a season, and then, I don't know, you go apart or whatever your reasoning is, and then you divorce, and then you remarry, and then it's just rinse and repeat, basically. But no, I completely agree with you. 1 in 5, I didn't read any.
Wild?
That is wild.
That's
like,
crazy.
I would like to take a poll, like, in church, like, how many of you?
I think I did see an article on, like, how many Christians, like, because it's largely, like, acceptable in, like, Muslim, like, areas. In different countries, but different countries also have Christians. So it may not be, like, within the U.S., but I'm sure, like, I mean, there may be people here in the U.S. that are Christians that I'm sure, like, I'm not, like, negating that, but I think the article I saw was, like, different countries, but a percentage of Christians also did believe it was morally acceptable.
Okay, so what you said also, you had said that, like, you mentioned how things are becoming, like, more permissible. Like, and what I read that Gen Z is the most, like, open generation to different ideologies and philosophies. So I think it is important because, like, well, I actually don't know, like, when Gen Z stops. I don't know the time frame, but I think like then there's another generation after Gen Z. Like, what are they gonna think? If Gen Z right now is the most open to all these different philosophies and ideas, what's the next generation gonna be like? Because I feel like it slowly, you know, each generation slowly became more open to things that they were not open to before. And so I just think it's important because, like, we're raising the next generation. Like, you know, like, when you guys have kids, my kids, like, what are they going to think? Because how is the world going to be when they're 18, 19? You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's why I think this is important because, we're ministering to Gen Z right now. Like, what are their thoughts on polygamy? And what are their thoughts on marriage? Because I mean, there's so much different philosophies on marriage. You know what I mean, with the whole LGBTQ, all of that stuff. So I think this is important because we're raising the next generation and we're ministering to Gen Z right now.
I will say though, I am glad that they had the conversation in the little pods, whether it was like, I don't know, the whole rumor and stuff. I am glad they had that. Kudos to them for like having that conversation because, like, now for me, I think in my opinion, like, I wouldn't. Well, they were dating-ish. I guess you call that dating. So I think in the dating stage, I thought that was a good. You know, those are hard conversations to have, but they're necessary conversations to have. So I will say, like, kudos to them for actually having that conversation, you know, because, I mean, God forbid, you know, you get into a marriage and then you barely want to ask, like, those questions of, like, what do you believe about, you know, this and, you know, so kudos for him for being vulnerable enough to be like, yo, like, this is my background, like, you know, like, this is, you know, where I come from and, you know, and then giving her that space to kind of, like, say what she thinks. I think she had I think she kind of reacted a little bit like what? When he said it.
And
but
she was like working out and she like kind of paused.
She's like wait, okay, no,
this is something to talk about.
So let's answer the question. Like what? Because the biggest question is, well, it's in the Bible, so explain. Like, is it okay? Like, what does God say about it? What does Jesus say about it? Because it's in the Bible.
Right.
Like, what's up with that?
Yeah. So. Okay, so I mean, we definitely see it. The guy who mentioned, the patriarchs in the Bible, that's true. Yeah. That is very true. They had multiple wives at one time, but I believe that everything in the Bible, everything recorded in the Bible is not endorsed. You know what I mean? So there are some things that are recorded in the Bible that are like historical facts. Like this. I'm just telling you that this is what happened. I'm not saying that you should go do it, but I'm recording what has happened. So I think that the Bible gives us things that we shouldn't do and that we shouldn't do. I mean, Solomon, for example, he had like, what, 700 wives. What was it? 300 concubines. Yeah, this man was...
He was out there.
I don't know how he was doing
they
but...
had a gang of sister wives in there. I think you make a good point because I think, like, just because the Old Testament allowed it, it didn't necessarily encourage it. Like, there's nowhere we see where, like,
you should do this.
Like, God's like, like, I'm condoning this. Like, you should do this. Like, it's there. And I think you'll kind of talk on it a little bit too. But like, it's this, it's the difference between, and we talked about it a little bit, but it's the difference between like God's permissible will versus his perfect will. You know, it's like we sometimes mistake God's so good. He's so gentle. He's so kind. Like, he's a gentleman. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, when I make decisions in my life, I'm like, dude, I just wish we had, like, it sounds real. I wish we had like a harsh God where he's like, girl, no, what are you doing? But because he's so gentle, he's so kind, and like he allows certain things, but that doesn't necessarily mean like this is his perfect. He's approving it, right? Yeah. He's not encouraging it, but like he did allow it. If we could say that in the Old Testament, we do see it, but
that's the whole free will conversation. You know what I mean? Like, why do bad things happen
to good people?
Yeah, because there's a
well, I would argue.
Okay. No, go ahead.
No, that I think
that are we really good?
Yeah, are we good?
That,
I mean, I don't know if we're inherently good, but I get the sentiment of the question.
Right.
Why does bad things happen to good people? You know, and yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that explains it well. You know, that there's a difference between God's permissible will and His perfect will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And another thing that I saw was, like, in the Old Testament, I believe that God allowed, you know, polygamy to happen because it was the lesser of two evils.
Yep.
You know, so back then in the Old Testament times, like, women, you know, they were extremely vulnerable. If they were unmarried, if they were widowed, if they were left without, you know, a male heir, and so that's why having sons was so important. And so, you know, if they weren't married, they can be led to out of desperation. They could be led to prostitution. And you know, they wouldn't have anything to provide for. They wouldn't have any way to provide for themselves. And so, like, then there was also men dying in wars. And so there wasn't enough men, you know, to marry just one woman. So, like, in order for them to not be drawn to that lifestyle, you know, to promiscuity, like, polygamy was an answer. You know, like, unfortunately, that was the solution for that time. You know, was it ideal? No. Was it the best thing? No. But it was kind of like the lesser of two evils kind of thing. And it provided women with more protection than if they hadn't done that. You know.
It was because of, like, you know, just them being uneducated and untrained. Like, they were typically, you know, slaves and prostitutes. So it was better and more beneficial for them to be, you know, a sister wife than it was for them to be, you know,
out
left
there
alone,
on the streets,
destitute, and like on their own. And so, you know, again, like you said, it's like the lesser of the two evils. And it's like, you know, it's but there was a scripture that where it was a law. There was a law that, I think you just touched on it, that it was mandatory. It was mandatory for them to marry. I think you did mention that. That was an actual law in the Old Testament. I didn't know that either. I was like, that was an actual law. And it might still, don't quote me. It might still be a law, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, that was an actual law that they had to, like, marry the widow.
Oh, the brother.
Yeah.
I saw that. That was in the Old Testament. I'm trying to remember.
Is Deuteronomy? Story. Was it Deuteronomy?
Yeah, but there was a story in Genesis where that happened, where the brother died. I want to say it might have been Jacob's sons. But I can't remember. But it was where the brother died or the husband died, and then the wife was supposed to marry the brother. What was that? Who was that? Where he was supposed to, because, you know, they're supposed to, like, of course, like, when having sex they need to procreate. Was it Tamar? No. Where the brother, like, he pulled out.
I don't remember.
You don't remember that story?
I know. I remember the story, but I don't remember.
Y'all. Yes,
and I don't remember that one specifically.
Yeah, like, so her husband died. I don't remember which story. Y'all Google it. I'm not lying. He was the husband died, and the father was like, okay, marry your sister-in-law because she needs covering, right? And we need more babies. And he pulls out, and that's where I think the Catholics, like, why they're against, like, birth control and everything, because in that story he pulls out because he's like, no, I'm not about to, I'm gonna have sex with you, but I'm not, we ain't having babies. That's
is it in Genesis? No,
it's in Genesis.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in Genesis. You guys Google it and comment on it, the story, because that's
a real thing. But let's go back to like just like, you know, God, or, you know, not specifically allowing, but not, you know, condoning it, or like I want to talk about that just like a little bit, like, because I think, like, we forget, like, there was a whole fall. We forget that, like, you know,
a whole fall.
There was a whole fall, and, you know, God's original intent for
everything
got distorted. And so, like, when we say that polygamy, God allowed it, we miss the fact that, you know, God gave Adam Eve. He said, you know, it's not good for man to be alone. You know, I'm going to give you a wife, you know, we know the story.
Yeah.
And so we miss that, like, that was God's original intent and design.
His perfect will
for mankind.
Yeah.
Like, that was his original intent. And so sometimes when we think, like, oh yeah, we see polygamy, and it's like, no, we forget, like we're trying to original intent for what marriage would look like, but then man falls and every single thing gets distorted, gets perverted, and so now God leaves mankind to their own devices, you know. I don't know. Shoot, I just lost my train of thought.
No, I think that's good. And so I was listening to Alan Parr. I love listening to love listening to Alan Parr. I think he's so, like, he's very theologically sound. Yes. So I really like to listen to him. And so I was reading an article, and it says that I'm just going to quote, you know, him from this article. It says, Parr says that men were motivated to marry multiple women to perpetuate their family lineage if their first wife was barren. So we do see that. We see that in the Old Testament with the patriarchs. That happened to multiple patriarchs where their wives were barren. And to create alliances between nations. He distinguishes between description and prescription. The Bible tells stories of people who fell short of God's standards. There's the fall, right? Just because God didn't strike them down doesn't mean he condoned their actions. Parr notes that God's patience is not permission.
Yeah.
I love that part.
That's so good.
Right?
I love that.
That his patience was not permission. So God is a patient God, right? And sometimes he allows us, like, outside of polygamy, sometimes he allows us to make our own decisions and do our own things, even if he's not approving of it, even if he's not condoning it. But just because it's happening, it doesn't, you know, just because he's being patient with us, it doesn't mean he's saying, yeah, go do that. Right. You know, I think that's a good thing that you're doing. And, you know, he even, you know, kind of how he mentioned God, he distinguishes between description and prescription. So yes, there are things described in the Bible, but it doesn't mean I'm prescribing it to you for you to take and to go run off with it. You know what I mean? Like a prescription, a doctor writes us a prescription saying, I want you to take this. I want you to consume this. But there are things that are described here in the text, but he's not saying, I want you to take this. I want to prescribe this to you for you to go do. And so I think we have to be mindful of that. Okay, like, is God describing this and just telling me that this is what happened, or is he prescribing it and telling me I need to take this, I need to consume it and run off with it?
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. Like, don't mistake God's patience with his permission. Wow. Because he's long suffering. Like, he's so long suffering. Like, the scripture that says, God does not slack concerning his promises, as some men count slackness, but he's long suffering, not willing that any of us should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So like, you know, and I think we see that time and time again in so many different stories. I don't know if you remember in 1 Samuel where God wanted to be the king of the Israelites, but they were like, looking at other nations, and they're like, this is what we want. Like, no, they have a king. We want a king. But because of God's patience, like, God could have been like, no, look, you know, because we sometimes want to paint the God of the Old Testament to be this, like, harsh and this, like, mean and this angry God, and like, you know, doesn't tolerate anything. But we see time and time again in these different stories of, like, how God is like, okay, I'm gonna be patient with you. Like, you want a king? And I think that story, that I think that what am I saying? The permissive, like, will, like, I think for another time we could talk about how many problems are attached to that, because I think that story goes on to be like, it's not this doesn't end well when God's permissive will has to step in, when we, you know, keep, you know, going against the grain of God's original intent. He doesn't take his hands off, but he becomes patient. He becomes gentle because he's not forceful. And so he permits them to have a king, and he permits us to have what we want, but it ultimately doesn't I don't know. I feel like, we look at different stories, not only in the Bible, but also in real time today, like what's happening when we allow the permissive will of God to take place in our lives, and how it doesn't end.
It doesn't
too well.
end well. Yeah,
It doesn't,
no, that's real. That's facts. I mean, I even think about, like, going back to the fall, you know what I mean? Like, look how long it took for Jesus to come. From
so
then,
done.
You know what I mean?
You think about it?
Yeah, like when you think about how patient was God, to allow that to unfold.
Yeah.
When we look at the genealogy in, what is it, in Matthew or in Luke, and we see how long it took, for Jesus to come. Yeah, like, God is so patient with us. Like, I mean, that's like you said, that's a whole nother conversation that I think we can kind of get into. But I wanted to look at Matthew 19. I think I have verse 3 through 9. And so this here is where the Pharisees kind of approach Jesus, and they're questioning him regarding divorce, and he kind of addresses divorce and polygamy in the same conversation. So I'm going to read it. Matthew 19, verses 3 through 9. Some Pharisees came to him to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" "Haven't you read," he replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female," this is what you just kind of mentioned, "and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." "Why then," they asked, "did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?" Jesus replied, "Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery." I'm going to stop right there. Like you had mentioned earlier, how God had his perfect will in the beginning before the fall. Jesus is explaining to them, like, hey, y'all trying to question me about divorce? Let me hit divorce and polygamy all in one conversation. Like, these things were established before the fall, but then man fell, and then God allowed these things to happen. And it literally says it in the text. He allowed these things because your hearts were hard. Like you said, like, we've had multiple situations, multiple scenarios where God has allowed certain things to happen because of the hardness of our hearts. But that was not his perfect will. That was not his original intent for things to be that way. He says, but it was not this way from the beginning. So I think we have to, we go back to God's perfect will. What is God's perfect will for men and women? That's good. It's to be in, and I think it's in, is it Timothy? No. Or Peter, where Paul is explaining the qualifications for
a husband.
Is that one? Okay. And for an elder.
Oh, for the elders.
And he says,
one of them think,
a man married to one wife. So we see, like, this is the New Testament.
There's an emphasis on one.
Exactly. And it says, Jesus even said it too, that the two shall become one flesh. The two, not 3, 4, 5, become like, we see it in the text. So I think we have to, again, when we go to the scripture, we have to analyze, yes, the New Testament or the Old Testament is so wild. There's so many different stories, like crazy, like it would make reality TV, look like nothing in these Old Testament stories. But we have to go to the word, and we have to unfold the truth of God. Look at it from look at the Old Testament, look at the New Testament. What is it saying? Because it is all one big story. And we have to analyze, okay, is this here to just record what has happened without it being prescribed to me? Is this just a description, or is it a prescription?
That's so good. And I kind of want to, like, insert this too, like, because I think I learned when I went to Bible college, I didn't know, like, I loved God's word when I first, got saved, but there was some parts of me where I was just like, what is this about? Like, you read certain like books like Leviticus or Revelation, and you're like, what is the point of some of this in the Bible? And you make a good point, like it's a story. And so I think I learned in Bible college, just for those who like, you're reading something in the Bible and like it's a description and not a prescription, and you're wondering, well, why is it in there? One of the things that I really learned, and it was gold to me, because it made all of the Bible, it made it all make sense. And I learned in one of my classes that there's an overarching narrative of the Bible. The Bible is a story, and all throughout Scripture we see creation, we see fall, we see redemption, and we see restoration, right? In the beginning we see creation, then we see fall, and all throughout the rest of the story, we see God trying to redeem what was lost in the garden. We see him trying to restore what was once lost in the garden. And so I think it's important to look at those stories through the lens of the overarching narrative of the Bible, of like, okay, like, and because like reading the Bible, and you're like, dude, like we get to see it from our vantage point. Like the people in the Bible, they're like living it, right? So they don't see how tore up. I mean, if our stories, like, once we die and go on, become something like, and people read it, like they'll probably look at our lives and be like, girl, like you didn't see what God was trying to do all along. So we get to see it from the vantage point of it's already been done, but they're actually living in it. But the beauty of us getting to see it is we get to see like the patterns in the Bible is really God's way of like trying to get his people back, like because I'll read stories, and I'm like, you'll read about the children of Israel, and you're like, dude, God's trying to get y'all to Joshua. If you could just hold on, and like he's trying to get you to a place. But and so you see all of these patterns, you're like, dude, like why do we keep seeing them patterns? And it's this idea of like, okay, this is the overarching narrative of the Bible. Like all throughout Scripture, you're gonna see God create things, you're gonna see man time and time again fall, but God trying to redeem, God trying to restore. And so yes, we fail, and yes, there was this permissive, and God allowed certain things, but that's because he's good, and he's ultimately trying to get us back to redemption, however he has to do it. If he has to, I hate to say it, I don't want to sound like a heretic, but if he has to use polygamy, if he has to use these certain situations, because he's patient, because he's kind, and he's not forceful, to get us ultimately back to what was lost in the garden, and that was one man, one woman. I love it. I love God's word. Ultimately procreating for the glory of God. And so to end this off, that also makes it, because just what you just said was just so like beautiful to me, because I think sometimes like, and this is we approach the Bible as, what does this say about me? Like we look at the text like, where do I see myself? We go to the scriptures, and that is such like horrible like Bible reading hermeneutics. Like we try to put ourselves in the story and like make it about ourselves, and it's like, no, you are approaching the text wrong. You open this up to figure out, what does this say about God? We're the Davids of this generation. Like, you can
fight a lot.
And I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of it.
And that's what we've been taught. That's what we've been taught.
What would it look like if we looked at like, man, no, maybe I actually am Goliath.
Right. Facts.
Like maybe I am God is
maybe
I am Pharaoh.
No,
maybe
seriously.
I'm actually Pharaoh.
Right. We always try and make ourselves the hero in the story, but there's one hero.
But because we forget that, like, everything in the Bible points to Jesus.
Right.
These are all foreshadowing. These are all foreshadowings of what's to come.
Exactly.
So it all leads and points back to Jesus. This is ultimately what Jesus wants to do for all of humanity.
And like you said, it was always God trying to bring us back to what it originally was. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we have bad hermeneutics, and we instead of exegesis, we do eisegesis, and we add all these extra things, and it's like, no, like, approach this text and read it and find out what this is telling you about God, because when you read it, just like you said, you're gonna see these patterns. but you're going to see that God was patient, that God was kind, that he was long-suffering. And so I just think that's a perfect way to end it. When y'all, do your study, I think we've been taught over and over again to put ourselves in the story. And there are areas in which that can absolutely be applicable to us. I'm not saying that there's,
But try to mix it up a little. Put yourself in a different, character. Try to mix it up a little bit, and don't always put ourselves in the hero, because I think, we find more benefit when we look at this as this is a foreshadowing of what Jesus ultimately wants to do.
This is not a self-help book. And I think sometimes we approach it as such. We approach it as, what does this say about me, and how do I put myself in here, and all of those things. And it's the Bible's not a self-help book, y'all. We've got to graduate from that,
It's time.
So I just think that's a perfect way to kind of end this conversation it was described absolutely, like you said, God, he was going to use whatever way he could,
by any means,
to get us back to what originally was. I love that. And I think that also goes into what does marriage symbolize? I think we also have to think about that too, is marriage is a symbolization of of Jesus in his church. You know what I mean? And so Jesus and his bride, and I think we take things and we like to run with it. But I think we have to look at the text. We have to sit down and approach it in a way that, what was, like you said, the people are actually living it. You know what I mean? And even the scribes, when they wrote these, their intentions were very different than how we think today, because the world has evolved. We've evolved since this text was written. So I think it's a matter of analyzing the text properly, and approaching it from the right standpoint.
That's good. Well, great conversation. Good stuff. Make sure you guys subscribe, hit the bell, comment,
give us reviews,
hit the bell notification so you can be notified whenever we upload episodes. Yes.
All right, y'all.
Until next time.
Hey.